This is a story by Isaac Beshevis Singer, a wonderful Yiddish writer, and I'm going to tell you the English version of it. My name is Shoshana Littman. At Hanukkah time, the road to the town was usually covered with snow, but the winter had been a mild one, and even though Hanukkah had almost arrived, there was hardly any snow. And the peasants started to complain. They said, with this dry weather, there's going to be a very poor harvest of winter grain. Grass sprouted in the fields, and so they just sent their cows out to pasture. It was a really bad year for Reuven the furrier, and after much thought and hesitation, he decided to sell Zlata, the goat. She was old, wasn't producing much milk anymore, and the butcher in town, Fievel, he said he would give 8 gulden for her. Now, with such a sum, they could buy what they needed for the family to celebrate Hanukkah. Candles for their menorah, potatoes and oil for latkes, the pancakes that we love on Hanukkah, and of course, gifts for the children. So Reuven told his eldest son, Aaron, that he should take Zlata to town. Now, Aaron was old enough to know what it meant to take a goat and sell her to a butcher. But his father told him, so he had to obey. And Leah, his mother, well, she wiped a tear from her eye. And his younger sisters, Miriam and Anna, they cried loudly. But what could he do? He put on his quilt jacket and a cap with earmuffs. And he got a walking stick and a big rope to tie around Zlata's neck. And he got himself a couple pieces of bread and cheese to eat along the way. The plan was he'd get to town in the evening, stay overnight at Fievel's, and come back in the morning with the money. So the family was saying their goodbyes to the little goat, and as Aaron was tying that rope around her neck, she was as patient and as good-natured as always. She shook her white bearded head. She gave Aaron a kiss, a lick on his hands. She trusted humans. They always fed her, never did her any harm. But when Aaron started leading her out on the road to town, well, she looked surprised. And she looked quizzically at Aaron as if to say, "Where are you taking me?" Because she'd never been this way before. But I guess she figured that it's really not up to a goat to ask questions. But the way looked so different. There were farmers' fields and huts with thatched roofs, and every once in a while a dog would come running at them, barking, and Aaron would chase it off with his stick. The day was bright and sunny as usual as they headed out. But soon there was this black cloud with a bluish center that blew in from the east, and not long before it covered the entire sky, and a cold wind blew in with it, and the crows flew low, croaking. It looked like it was going to rain, but it didn't rain. No, it hailed like in summer, and it got so dark, even though it was early in the day, it was dark as dusk, and soon that hail turned to snow. Now, Aaron had lived through 12 winters. He'd experienced all kinds of weather, but he'd never seen snow like this. It was so thick and dense, he could hardly see, and soon the road was covered with snow. Now, that road to the town, it was narrow and windy, and soon he just could not see where to go, and the cold was penetrating his quilt jacket. Now, at first, Zlata, she didn't seem to mind the change in the weather. She'd seen 12 winters too. She knew what winter was all about. But then when the snow got deeper and deeper, well, again, she looked at Aaron and asked with her mild eyes, "What are we doing out in this storm?" And Aaron hoped that a peasant would come by on a sleigh and help them out, or a cart. No one showed up. Now, the snow continued to whirl around them in huge flakes, and it looked like there were white imps playing in the field, and white dust rose up from the ground. And Zlata stopped. She could walk no more. She planted her cloven hoofs in the snow, and she would not budge. She started bleating, as if crying, pleading to be taken home. Well, there were icicles hanging from her white beard, and her horns were glazed with frost. Now, Aaron didn't want to admit the danger they were in, but he knew if they didn't find shelter soon, they would freeze to death. This was no ordinary storm. This was a mighty blizzard. The snow was up to Aaron's knees, and his fingers were numb. He could barely feel his toes. When he breathed, he choked, and his nose felt like wood, so he rubbed snow on it. And Zlata's bleating now definitely sounded like crying. These humans with whom she had placed so much trust had just dragged her into a trap. And Aaron began to pray to God to save him and this poor innocent animal. Suddenly, he saw this small white hill in the distance, and he wondered, who would pile up snow like that? And when he got closer, he realized this was no hill. This was a big haystack, which the snow had blanketed. Immediately, he knew they were saved. He started digging in that snow with all his might. He was a village boy. He knew what to do. When he got through the snow, he got to the hay, and then he dug out a passageway to make a little nest for himself and the goat. You see, it may be cold outside, but inside hay, it's always warm. And hay is food for Zlata. When she smelled it, she became contented and started to eat. Now it continued to snow outside, and soon it had covered the passageway that Aaron had dug. But a boy and a goat need air to breathe, and there wasn't much air in this little nest he had dug. So Aaron very carefully cleared out the snow from the passageway, and he worked hard to keep a window open to the night and the storm. Well, Zlata continued to eat, and when she had had her full, you could see that her trust in humanity had been restored. And Aaron, he ate his bread and his cheese, but when he was done, he was still hungry after that difficult journey. He looked at Zlata, and he saw that her udders were quite full. So he lay down beside her in such a way so that when he milked her, he could squirt the milk right into his mouth. Oh, and that milk, it was warm and it was sweet. Now, Zlata had never been milked in this way before, but she didn't resist. To the contrary, she seemed eager to reward Aaron for bringing her to a shelter whose very ceiling, walls, and floors were made of food. Well, Aaron could see the chaos outside, and he could see that the wind was blowing before it great drifts of snow, and it was so dark he couldn't tell if it was night or if it was just the storm. But inside the hay, thank God, it was warm and it was dry. The dried hay and grass and field flowers exuded the warmth of summer. Zlata continued to eat from above, from her right, from her left, from below. And she gave off a wonderful animal warmth, and Aaron cuddled up beside her. He had always loved Zlata, But now he loved her like a sister. He was cut off from family. He was all alone. He needed to talk. So he talked to Zlata. He said, Zlata, what do you think about what's happened to us? And she responded, meh. And he said, Zlata, if we hadn't found this haystack, we would have been frozen solid by now. And she agreed. Meh. You know, if it continues to snow like this, we could be here for days. And she said, meh. So he said, what does meh mean? You better speak up more clearly. She tried, meh, meh. Then he became more patient. He said, ah, let it be meh then. You may not be able to speak, but I think I understand. I need you and you need me. Isn't that right? She said, meh. Oh, Zlata, so sweet. Now, Aaron was tired, so he made a pillow out of hay, and he lay down on it, and soon he was fast asleep, and Zlata dozed off too. When Aaron awoke, it was so dark he couldn't tell if it was morning or night. And then he realized the snow had covered that passageway he had dug. But this time, he couldn't even reach the opening with his arms fully outstretched. Good thing he had that walking stick with him, and he broke through to the night air. Oh, the wind was howling, sometimes in one voice, sometimes in many. Sometimes it sounded like devilish laughter. Well, Zlata woke up, and when Aaron greeted her, she said, meh. Now, she may have only had one word in her language, but it meant many things. Now, she was saying, we must accept whatever God gives us, warmth or cold, satisfaction or hunger, light or darkness. Aaron woke up hungry, and he'd eaten all his food, but Zlata still had plenty of milk. Well, Zlata and Aaron, they stayed in that haystack for 3 days. And during those 3 days, Aaron loved Zlata more and more. She fed him with her milk. She helped keep him warm. And she comforted him with her patience. And Aaron, he told her lots of stories, and she always perked up her ears to listen. And when he patted her, well, she would lick his hands and his face, and she would say, meh, and he knew that meant, I love you too. Well, it snowed for those 3 days, but after the first day, the snow wasn't quite so heavy, and the wind lightened up. And Aaron got to thinking, maybe it never had been summer. It snowed all the time. And he didn't have parents or sisters. He was a snow child, born of the snow. And so was Zlata. And it was so quiet in the hay that his ears rang. Well, Aaron and Zlata stayed inside the haystack, and they slept all the night and most of the day too. And as for Aaron's dreams, they were always of warm weather, green fields, trees covered with beautiful flowers, clear brooks, bird songs. On the 3rd day, the snow stopped, and so did the wind. And that night it was clear. But Aaron didn't dare try to find his way home at night alone. He could see that the moon was out, casting silvery nets upon the snow. He wanted to go outside and see how the world looked. So he dug his way out of that haystack and through the snow. And the world, it was so white and quiet, dreaming dreams of heavenly splendor. And the stars, they were large and close, and the moon swam as if in a sea. Well, on the fourth morning, they heard sleigh bells. You see, that haystack, turns out it was not very far from the road. And the peasant on the sleigh showed Aaron the way, not to the town and the butcher, but home, to the village. Now, his parents and their neighbors had searched for Aaron and Zlata throughout the storm, and when they could find no sign of the boy or the goat, they feared they were lost. And his mother and his sisters cried for him, and his father became silent and moody. Suddenly, a neighbor came running with the news. Zlata and Aaron, they're coming up the road. There was such joy in the family. And Aaron told them how he had found the haystack and how Zlata had fed him with her milk. And his two sisters, they embraced that little goat and they kissed her and they gave her her favorite meal of chopped carrots and potato peelings, which she ate up hungrily. No one ever thought of selling Zlata again. They didn't need to. The family was doing well now with the cold weather. Everyone needed the services of it's not Aaron's dad. They needed him. What could they do without him? Reuben was a great guy at that point. And, they had enough potatoes and oil so Leah, Aaron's mom, could fry latkes every night. And of course, Zlata always got her fair share. Now, Zlata had her own pen, but she liked to visit. So she would knock with her horn on the kitchen door to let them know she was ready to come in, and she'd always be welcomed. And in the evening, Aaron and Miriam and Anna would play dreidel, spinning top with Hanukah gelt. And Zlata, she'd get comfortable by the warm stove, and she'd watch the children play and see the candles flickering on the menorah. And sometimes Aaron would ask her, Zlata, you remember those 3 days we spent together? And Zlata, she would scratch her neck with her horn, and she would shake her white, furry, bearded head, and she would utter the one sound she had to express all her thought and all her love. Meh. Thank you. Zlateh the Goat by Beshevis, singer.